the work of liberation is often quite ugly. It's necessarily violent work. That it requires, if we're going to take what you said as deeply seriously as we must, that it require that liberation within that which is liberatory requires destruction. It requires the elimination of certain things, certain systems, certain relations, for that matter, maybe certain people. How do
Is this University of California professor calling for the elimination of people? What the fuck? Again, what does liberation require? University of California, Riverside professor.
work? That it requires, if we're going to take what you said as deeply seriously as we must, that it require that liberation within that which is liberatory requires destruction. It requires the elimination of certain things, certain systems, certain relations, for that matter, maybe certain people. How do we think about that? Right,
What kind of people?
the difficulties, the messiness, the violence of liberatory and liberation work, alongside the stuff that makes us feel joyful as we think about freedom and the possibilities, of coming into some kind of affinity with liberation. I mean, how do we do that? Or how do you?
How do we eliminate people that are against our liberatory revolutionary agenda? But we do it joyfully, guys. We're going to eliminate the people who do not support our liberatory agenda with violence, but we're going to do it with joy. Are you shitting me? Can we listen to that whole thing again? And by the way, when he's talking about eliminating certain systems, of course, the system that he's talking about eliminating is capitalism. That is what they mean perpetually. That means private property ownership. That also means the government, because they believe the government is a capitalist institution and they can only get what they want. We can only achieve full liberation when the system of capitalism is fully eliminated, up to and including the government and the Constitution. That is what they mean. But let's just listen again.
We feel things as we do various forms of political work and study and thought. And so as you were talking, as we raised the question, and as you started talking about liberation, the notions of liberation and that which is liberatory, I felt a certain kind of joy, a certain kind of incitement that was good. It was like affirming. And then I had to take a step back as I was listening to you and think about how the work of liberation is often quite ugly. It's necessarily violent work. That it requires, if we're going to take what you said as deeply seriously as we must, that it require that liberation within that which is liberatory requires destruction. It requires the elimination of certain things, certain systems, certain relations, for that matter, maybe certain people. How do we think about that? Right, the difficulties, the messiness, the violence of liberatory and liberation work, alongside the stuff that makes us feel joyful as we think about freedom and the possibilities,
Bro.
of coming into some kind of affinity with liberation. I mean, how do we do that? Or how do you try to do that? Like, because I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to do it. So I end up getting wrapped up in one thing or the other. I vacillate between those things, but I'm wondering if you have a way of thinking about it.
It's like so much destruction has to happen for this kind of liberation. There's just, we like live on an apparatus of like, military extractive exploitive systems. And it's really terrifying. I think one thing that's useful to remember is that like we didn't set it up this way. Humans have resisted the state form, warfare, inequality of all kinds for all time, and small elites have made them happen, and they've done that through extreme violence. So it's not surprising that violence is necessary to undo it. Like they're not going to put their weapons down because we make a good argument at City Hall.
Right.
And so it's going to be it's going to be and is and has already been forever. It's actual brutal confrontations, and a lot of that is hidden from certain people, or it's made into like it's not narrated as violence. It's like it's okay for the police like pick people up and kidnap them and put them in cages, and we are like that's not violent, you know. So that it's like all these narratives hide what's actually happening. And yeah, we have to actually fight back. And when people do, they also get made an example of, and there's extreme repression. We see that. And so it makes sense that we're scared of it. And also because we're scared of it, we maybe don't study closely enough. Like, well, what are better ways to do it? What are the worst ways what have been the pitfalls when people have taken up bolder tactics that are absolutely necessary? And I think people are all turned away from that. And one place that I see this, you know, I'm sure many of you know that in August, 61 activists were who are part of the Defend the Atlanta Forest, Stop Cop City movement. They're trying to stop a police training facility from being put on top of this forest in Atlanta. They were indicted on these like domestic terrorism charges and these like racketeering and conspiracy charges, and they're framed and you know as like these people who have this horrible you know anarchist conspiracy, etc. And one of the responses that a lot of people had was, oh no, a lot of these people are just handing out flyers. They're just trying to stop, you know, and there's a kind of distancing from the fact that because some of them are using tactics like occupying the trees in the forest, destroying the equipment that's being used to tear the forest down. Of course, that's a great idea to sabotage the projects of our opponents. They're not just begging the city to stop. They're not going to by begging. We've tried that in many situations. They're also taking direct action. And that it also includes a huge public information campaign that includes flyers and Molotov cocktails and fires and living in a tree, you know, and watching people try to distance themselves. To me, that's like the legacy of this fear of bold tactics and of armed resistance, which has always been part of resistance, here by Indigenous people, by Black people, by Puerto Ricans, by so many different people who've been fighting violence and injustice here and all over the world, colonized people. So yeah, so I think it's really hard. There's a really big narrative about pacifism, and that goes hand in hand with liberalism, and it's supposed to keep us all in our places, doing some ineffective marches once in a while.
Pacifism is a liberal narrative to keep them from being violent. Excuse me?
Violence and injustice here and all over the world, colonized people. So yeah, so I think it's really hard. There's a really big narrative about pacifism, and that goes hand in hand with liberalism, and it's supposed to keep us all in our places, doing some ineffective marches once in a while, and writing things on Instagram, and things stay the same. And then when people try to do something more bold, a lot of times we just throw them under the bus. So there's a lot of pain there.
Yeah, just two shout outs. One to Robert and Mabel Williams, who taught me that pacifism, taught many of us that pacifism shit will get you killed. So just shout out to that lesson from Robert and Mabel Williams. And